So I want to talk about seeing things from a different perspective and how helpful that was for me in my journey. So initially, there's the perspective of the obvious perspective of struggling with whatever you're struggling with, wherever you're at, however difficult it is, however much you've lost, however difficult your life has become, and people can find themselves in really tough situations, I know, and it can, feel really helpless and horrible. Can be really, really tough. So there's that perspective which we find ourselves in most of the time, and then there's another perspective, and maybe after a year of going through this for me, and maybe after I'd hit rock bottom, although I kind of started coming into touch with this perspective more, kind of throughout my whole journey, since this whole thing started. Yeah, it was always kind of where this was pushing me. So what I'm kind of talking about is, for me, it was this fascination with life itself. And I guess what this whole journey for me was, it was a way to really just allow myself to orient towards what really at the deepest level felt like the most important thing for me to investigate. Because before there was so much baggage and other stuff with life that you got to do this because this is what everybody does, and you got to live this kind of life, and you got to have these kinds of things, you got to live this kind of balanced life, with all of this kind of stuff. So I was never going to just like drop everything and just investigate what my experience of life was. But from the get-go, like, this was feeling like a journey that I was going on. Like, I remember when the whole thing first started happening, and I was like, I'm going to have to just start dropping everything because there's something going on here and I need to figure it out. So I remember, like, I'd been in a relationship for a long time, and it was very up and down, and a part of me knew that it needed to come to an end, but I was never able to do it. It was just one of those ones that kept on going on, and then eventually all this stuff with my health started happening, and that had to end. And then I dropped my studies, which again I was doing well at, but it really didn't resonate with me. So, like, again, I had to let go of that, and then I wasn't distracting myself with exercise and socializing and all of those things. All of that was gone. It was like, what is there left to do when you're really struggling, but every single coping mechanism has been taken away? And this whole time I was becoming more and more curious, because again, everything to keep oneself busy in life was kind of gone, and was like, well, what is this? I was left, like, really trying to investigate the deeper questions of, what is this whole thing that we're all here part of. So that was happening the whole time, and initially it was really intellectual. It was like, I got quite interested in philosophy and reading quite a few books on philosophy and, like, physics, because it was like, this is where the answers lie to what is everything. Like, those were the intellectual subjects that were asking those kinds of questions. Philosophy was all about what is reality, that kind of stuff. But that felt wrong. It was like, this is too intellectual, and I wasn't maybe thinking about it like that at the time. I was, it just, I couldn't do it. It was like, it was too much up in the head, and so when I was reading a book that was really intellectual, I would, looking at it through the perspective of symptoms and the illness, I would have like a really bad flare-up, or not a really bad flare-up, but it would start to bring on symptoms like, but I started to see that this was just, like, this wasn't it. that was not the way to go. And then I started meditating, and that just felt great from the get-go. And then the more uh, I started to get interested in the deeper aspects of meditation and listening to different teachers talk about the shifts in identity and how it can be a way to like really investigate the nature of consciousness or the nature of the mind or the nature of experience itself. And that really resonated with me because that was like the deeper stuff that I was really being pulled towards, but it wasn't up in the head. It was just, you can just investigate your direct experience right here. Like, what is this? What is the feeling of being an experiencer? And can you investigate that duality of a subject and object and experience? Is there somebody experiencing experience, or is there just experience in itself? So there's that aspect. And then this different perspective I'm talking about is what started happening. And even when I was still looking at things through a very intellectual scientific lens, because that was like stimulated a lot of awe and fascination in myself as well. It's just like got really interested in evolution and that kind of stuff. And there was just this part of me that was just completely like, when I was going through a really difficult patch, I would try to touch into this different perspective of like, how is there anything happening at all right now? So maybe my present experience is negative emotions and difficult symptoms and sensations, but because I was so interested, like I said initially I was looking at it through a very scientific lens of like the fact that there's anything at all, that like evolution brought to this point where where I'm here having an experience is like mind-boggling. And that was just such a different perspective from the problem of my life and the stuckness that I felt that I was in, to just realize like, well, if there was nothing at all, just nothing, wouldn't I want to experience something and everything that came with it, and the fullness of experience with all of the really intense stuff. So that was like just an initial shift in perspective that could really help, because it can be so difficult just seeing things through the perspective of me and my problems and trying to figure out your way through life. Whereas this kind of curiosity and fascination at just life itself and just consciousness. And I was really interested in consciousness. Again, initially from an intellectual perspective, just like, what the hell is consciousness? Like, why is there conscious experience? And then I started to investigate that more and more directly, and then things were not so intellectual anymore. It was kind of a letting go of that orientation and more just like what I was really seeking was right here all the time, and I could just start to investigate it by investigating this sense of me. That's something I learned from various spiritual teachers. It's like a method called self-inquiry, combined with meditation. So becoming aware of thoughts and calming the mind, and then starting to, and it really helped to meditate first to not be so caught up in thoughts, and then to realize that you are not the thoughts themselves. Like, we're all caught up in this world of thought, this constant narrative running in our heads. And once you start to investigate that, you're like, oh, that's just a thought. That's just a thought. Like, every single thing you can think is just a thought. What the hell are you? Like, if everything you think it's just a thought. What is not a thought? And starting to investigate that. So that's when there was less of a fighting with trying to fix this whole problem of me, of my life, of, I've gotten so sick and I've completely lost my life. And that it was like realizing that that had actually been a gift, that I'd been given, I had everything taken away from me, which had left me with only one place to go. And it was what I really, really always wanted. But when I was caught up in the thoughts and the ego, like I had to have my ego stripped away from me. Life did a good job of it, like just take everything away and then what's there left to do. But if I hadn't had that all taken away, I wouldn't have just dropped everything and investigated the most important thing. And then really the whole chronic illness kind of fell into the background as it was seen. It wasn't separate from this whole thing. It wasn't like there's me, there's my life, and then there's this chronic illness. This has come and fucked up my life, and now I've got to fix it. It was more like this whole thing was a part of everything. Like the reason this thing was so tough, like there was stuff going on, but it was so tough because I was fighting it so much because of all this, these resistance patterns and this identification with, like all these identities that have been taken away. And that was what was so uncomfortable. It was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I thought this was who I am. I thought this was who I am, but those are all gone. So who the hell am I? And it was like, that's what was making this experience so tough. But it was just like being pushed towards really getting under my own suffering, and eventually realizing that that was actually a possibility. So originally, like when I started meditating a lot and getting more interested in it, like various spiritual traditions would talk about like enlightenment and liberation and that kind of stuff, and it would seem like such a, yeah, well, that's for like a Buddhist monk who sits and meditates in a cave for 10 years, and maybe he calms his mind to a whole nother level that's not possible for the average human. And then I came across teachers like Angelo Delullo, who such a powerful teacher, and just makes it so clear that anybody can get under their own suffering if they're willing to, if it feels like the most important thing to them, and it really resonates with them, and they're really willing to face what they need to face. There really is a possibility to go beyond the life of suffering that most humans, and dissatisfaction, like maybe some people the suffering isn't so extreme, but it's just this constant like, this isn't it, like surely there's more to life than this. And there really is a possibility to be investigated. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about things from that perspective a bit, because that's really what happened for me. It was just realizing that the whole lens of how I'd been looking through things was kind of completely wrong, and just to open up to this other perspective that like, holy shit, like it's so easy to get caught up in the mind, the thoughts and the problems of the mind, but just to be like, what the hell is this? Like this what is it? And yeah, that different perspective of just like, no matter how tough things are in the moment, if I could just remember that, just like this reality, like what is it? And then eventually I just completely oriented towards it, and that just became the most important thing to me, was like realizing that this was possible to actually, in my direct experience, find truths about reality, or experiential shifts can happen. And yeah, I find it difficult to talk about that kind of stuff. So if this resonates with anybody, I highly recommend, if you want to get into the deeper stuff, Angelo's channel, Simply Always Awake. He's a really good teacher. His books are really good. But yeah, eventually this just became the most important thing to me, and it was seeing that this chronic illness was like a catalyst. And I would often think to myself, and again, like I really went through times where it just felt like hell and I didn't want to exist anymore. And then eventually, when I started to see things from this different perspective, it was like, why was I so lucky to have this happen to me, where I didn't just have to keep on suffering and suffering? Like I had this massive thing happen, and it really forced me to really dig in, and yeah, that just completely threw myself into that, and that's when just embraced the whole situation. It wasn't fighting it anymore. It was like, well, this is what my life is going to be like. Don't try and fight it. Don't feel like, oh, I want to do this kind of thing with my life. It's like, no, this is what I'm going to be doing. Just and then life takes care of itself. It was like, just focus on what felt most important, and everything else took care of itself. So yeah. Anyways, I hope that's helpful, maybe, or if it resonates with anybody, and you feel like you want to investigate that kind of stuff. Angelo's a great teacher. Ajashanti's a great teacher. There's a lot of good teachers around. But yeah, all the best to everyone.